Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. To keep this podcast free, we're partnering with Stoke Seeds. Pre-plan your indoor seed starting program today with the help of Stoke's 2018 Gardening Guide and their online articles. Whether you're adding texture through foliage, choosing a new variety for a splash of color, developing an existing garden, or starting from scratch, Stoke Seeds has some great catalog and online resources to help you through the process. More than just a listing of vegetable and flower seeds, the Stoke Seeds website is a complete resource center with valuable information on seed starting, planting, and harvesting, plus all the gardening accessories you need to make your garden the envy of the neighborhood. Get growing with Stokes. Now, today's question. Fred, we did get a couple of email questions this week, and one came from Ann, and she says, last year my creeping phlox started looking leggy and thin. Can I fix that for this spring?
Yes. However, another year we're going to change the schedule a little bit. First of all, that is more or less what the little plant does. It comes up, thickens up in the spring, or, well, let's just say it returns to active growth, thickens up, flowers its little head off, and then when that is done, the plant, it doesn't go into rest. It goes into high production that is replacing plant parts, root parts, setting flower bud for the following year, down deep in the tissue, and so on. And I think I don't know quite how to answer this. I have two patches of it, and I'm going to call them patches because they're not in a regular shape at all. And part of the reason that they're not in a regular shape is I use the sharp edge of a spade blade to keep it where it belongs. And I keep changing the pattern. I will go in from let's just say the edge of a group of plants. I'll go in 12, 18 inches, maybe occasionally more, and literally chop off the parts that are out where I don't want them to be. This causes the plant to have to regrow from the center. And again, I try to stay at even in this case, the 25, 30, certainly I would not exceed the 50% removal of plant tissue. Then the plant will indeed thicken itself up and get ready to look better in the summer and probably thicker, better flowering the following year. Beyond that, you'd have to be taking cuttings, rooted cuttings, and starting new plants and so on, which certainly can be done. Several of the areas that I have creeping phlox in is, call it trimmings from the original body of the plant, although I change up, I want some different colors here and there. Fertilization would be handy. Now, by that, I'm going to recommend a low nitrogen, well, flat out, a low-level plant food. Certainly not to exceed triple 12, triple 10, 10-6-4. And I would recommend strongly, even though there's a bit of additional cost, I would recommend a slow-release fertilizer so that as the plants continue to grow or regrow after you've gotten after them, they'll tend to thicken up just pretty much on their own. Then it's just hands off, wait till spring, and hopefully when it comes back out, it will be thicker than you would have expected had you not trimmed it back in the spring. So I think pruning in this case, and then adequate water, although phlox doesn't dare stand in water, a slope, a raised bed, whatever is good, and so on, so that you keep the plant growing well. Then it'll thicken itself up, but it also dies back individual strands. I've been known to bend down when I'm looking for a weed root I'll also snip off a dead twine. I'm going to call it a twine, a twining branch of the phlox at the same time. So I think multiple approaches, the cutting back, slight application, a light application of fertilizer right after you have pruned it into the early spring growth will thicken up and pretty much take care of itself from there.
Now, since you basically plant phlox to get that nice carpet in the springtime, that beautiful color, would you wait until after the bloom?
Oh, yes, by all means, Mark. This and thanks for asking, because this plant follows almost the total general rule, prune following the bloom. I'm not certain when phlox sets flower buds. I would guess that it's in the mid to late fall. And I guess I've never thought about that before, in particular, because, well, I cut it back and it does its thing. So anytime after midsummer, I think you might be cutting off some flowering potential. I don't know that the flower buds have set at that point. And certainly, if a plant is taking on an errant shape or growing too fast in a direction, you could cut it back. But you would be taking off the potential for the following year's flower. So, yeah, by all means, I would not prune after the 1st of August. And I'm thinking as I talk here, hopefully right. 1st of August and then on into after it blooms. And I have on occasion had it stand tall enough, which is clear up to maybe 2.5 inches. I've gone in and trimmed down on it a little bit because, again, we want that cascade of low spreading plant. And what a fine job it does. But then by all means, I would prune, refresh, fertilize, and so on right after it finishes its flowering period.
It never ceases to amaze me the creativity of some people when it comes to training their plants, and especially phlox. I have seen it. I saw somebody recently, they had a couple of old barrels, and they had one sitting upright, and they had the other one tilted down, and it almost looked like a waterfall cascading from one to the other.
Interesting.
Down with this blue phlox. It was so beautiful.
Well, that is, and the plant allows itself to be managed in that regard. Let's just go another step. I'm hoping that her plants are still in a sunny area. Creeping phlox can handle what I will call reduced light, but phlox in general is a sun-loving plant, and the same with the little creeper. So hopefully it's not too shady. If so, then I would move parts of the plant on out farther or set up new spots and so on. But yes, in terms of interest, I've watched it literally flow like water, not from barrels as you're speaking of, but down over 2 walls where it's planted obviously above the top wall, comes out over, and then, well, in the one case, it probably dropped as much as 18 inches on the height of that wall and then out across the ground, and then another 18-inch drop. And I'm almost sure in this case that they probably took up grass at the base of the wall so the plant could come on out, we'll call it into or toward the yard, because I'm guessing that they initially planted it on the top as they might have been instructed, and then it just simply has done its own thing from there. And it is truly attractive, and it's about a 2-week bloomer. Matter of fact, a little more than that sometimes, where you get bright pink, blue, white, whatever it might be. Well, worth having for that period of time.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. Remember, pre-plan your indoor seed starting program with the help of Stokes Gardening Guide and their online resources. And request your free catalog while you're online. For the best selection of vegetable, flower, and herb seeds available, go to stokeseeds.com. Cultivating successful growers for generations.